Good afternoon, everyone around the world. I hope you can hear me. We are trying out the technology a little bit here. People are sitting in different countries around the world. So we will the first century technology can facilitate us. And I'd like to welcome everyone to this session. It is entitled Transboundary Cooperation for Flood, Drought, and Land Degradation Management in the Eastern Nile. We have gathered 4 speakers for this session. They are from Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, and from United Kingdom. And we have a moderator from Uppsala University in Sweden, and myself is from CV at Stockholm International Water Institute in Sweden. This session is also organized jointly with the International Center for Water Cooperation, which is part of, is hosted by CV, and we have financial support from the Shared Water Partnership, which is a global program hosted by CV, dealing with water diplomacy on a global level. So for this session, we have Professor Gete Seleke from the Water, Land and Resource Center at Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia. So Professor Gete will speak about the upper part of the Blue Nile on Lake Tana. And then we have from Sudan, Khalid Hasabala from the Hydraulic Research Center at the Ministry of Water Sources and Electricity. Khalid will speak about the recent catastrophic floods in Sudan. And we have from Egypt, we have Professor Ali Arabi from Ain Shams University, and he will inform us about the situation in Nile River Delta. And finally, we have Kevin Wheeler, who will take a little bit more of a broad view on the basin in terms of hydrology linked to the infrastructure in place and that which is currently being built. As you understand, we have representatives from the 3 countries sharing the Blue Nile, and of course there's a lot of focus on the GERD and the installment of the GERD, filling up and so on, and how the agreements will take place. However, this will not be our main focus, although we will probably touch a little bit on this situation. But we thought we should focus a little bit on the recent problems that is occurring in relation to floods in several parts of the basin, particularly Sudan, also South Sudan, and to some extent in Ethiopia. So too much water is one of the issues that the basin has to deal with, similarly to many parts around the world. But on the other side, this region is also often struck by droughts and even several year-long droughts, prolonged droughts. So it's very important to find efficient and effective manners to manage droughts when it's hitting the region. And that's another topic for discussion, and of course a big part of the current negotiations related to the dam. So these are 2 kind of hazards that the basin needs to address in the future. Now I will see if we have managed to get Professor Gete on board. I cannot see him at the moment, unless he is among the audience. But I will then ask, maybe I will give the floor to Khalid Hasabala to introduce us to the situation in Sudan recently, which have struck by very, very large flood problems, both in the last year, 2019, and this year, 2020. So I will now transfer the presentation to
Gete is
Khalid,
joined.
and he can
Gete
share his.
has joined.
Okay, let's see then. Then we should actually go back to see if we can get on board. Professor Getty, it's good to see you here.
Thank you.
I will now, I've just had a bit of introduction, not sure if you heard it, but we will start from the upper parts of the basin, and we will allow you to present a little bit about the situation in Lake Tana, the source of the Blue Nile. So the title of your presentation is Environmental Threats to Lake Tana, which is the source of the Blue Nile in Ethiopia. Call for joint efforts from Eastern Nile riparian countries. I know that the situation on land degradation and its impact in Ethiopia is quite dire. And I will now transfer the presentation role to you and allow you to make your presentation.
For me. Matt, it's my turn now, or who?
Yes. Okay. It's your turn now.
Can I share my screen?
Yes. You can share your screen.
Got it now?
Yes, it's coming now.
Well, thank you, Mats, and good afternoon, everybody. Ali, Kevin, my apology for not able to join you in some of the meetings. You hear me, Mats? I'm loud?
Please go on. I can hear you fine. Maybe you can put the slides on view format.
Yeah, it is in view format, actually. So, you know, I actually was born and grown in the source of Nile. And while I was young, the area was covered by forest, and population was very small. But looking back, after 50 years, the whole forest is gone. The area is heavily degraded. Population is almost quadrupled. And all the sediment is collected and entered into Lake Tana, as you can see in the picture here. And every year, millions of tons of soil are silted up in Lake Tana. Lake Tana, because of the hydropower management, it has now about 90% or above sediment trap efficiency. So that means the whole sediment you see in the river is actually entering the Lake Tana. Every year, from our calculation, about 12 million tons of soil is entering, and more than 90% of the soil is left in Lake Tana. And what you see, I don't know, the upper picture, if you see my mouse, that is Lake Tana. That is the color of Lake Tana during the rainy season. So this is actually not a lake. it looks a river. And of course, much of the wetlands of Lake Tana is gone already. This was the left side was the reds are the wetlands. 1973, there was about 10%. And this is in 1986. And in 2020, the whole wetlands are gone. It was all silted up and cultivated. Not only that, very recently, the lake is again affected by a weed. I think many of you are familiar with water hygiene. As you can see in the picture, the people are trying to clean much of the northern part of Lake Tana. As you can see, it is covered by water hygiene, and it is being expanded. This picture is a bit old. The people are trying to clean it. They try machine, they try manual, but it doesn't. It looks like it doesn't work. Now, considering Lake Tana, which is a shallow lake, and considering the massive sediment that is entering into the lake, considering the current water hygiene infestation, I think Lake Tana, which is shallow lake, is going to silt it up soon. So, you know, once nature starts changing its microclimate, the chance of returning back is very low. So the chance that we lose the source of Blue Nile soon or later is imminent. And that means the Nile also will die, because ultimately it's source of water. You know, my worry, of course, you know, for politicians and some professionals whose careers is just 4 or 5 years term, this issue is not alarming. It doesn't matter. But for leaders and professionals who cares for generation or the future generation, this is an alarming threat and need to be addressed as soon as possible. And, you know, having grown in that part of the country and looking Lake Tana in this kind of color and shape, and every year it's shrinking, the wetlands are completely lost and now converted into cultivated land. And when I see also the current negotiation by the 3 countries, which only focuses on this share of water, etc., I really feel sad. I feel sad. We have so many information I can provide at another time. So my recommendation is, I have 2 very short recommendations. Instead of only focusing on share of the water, which is also important, I can understand that part. I think we have to also emphasize in protecting the source of the Blue Nile. As I said, once nature reaches its no point of return, it will be difficult to get it back. So the second recommendation from me is, I call upon Sudan and Egypt to really join the effort of the government of Ethiopia in rehabilitating and conserving the source of Blue Nile. Not only join the effort of the government of Ethiopia, but also encourage the government of Ethiopia to take more action in protecting and rehabilitating the source of the Blue Nile, which I believe the action so far taken is not to my satisfaction also. So both ways, join the effort, but at the same time also encourage the government of Ethiopia to take more action in rehabilitating the source of the Blue Nile before it is late to act. So this is my short message. Thank you much. Abdel. Hello, Mats. I'm finished.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It took a while to change the presenter here. Thank you, Gete, for that excellent insight into the situation in Lake Tana. It's a place where a lot of people have heard about, but very few have visited. So that's good to get the insight. I can see you're putting the finger on an important problem, which is soil erosion leading to sediment load in the river. And that is something that needs to be discussed more, I guess. And it puts the finger on the need for not only looking at the water itself, the flowing blue water, but also on the wider basin management, which is also a shared responsibility and a shared opportunity. How do we manage river basins in the best possible way? And the sediments have its own history, of course, because it can be a real problem, but it's also an asset because it brings nutrients. So how can we balance a reasonable amount of sediments to feed agriculture areas, which is very much needed, etc. And of course, with new infrastructure, that is something which is being halted. So another dimension to discuss. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Khalid Hazabala at the Hydraulic Research Institute in Sudan. While doing that, I will also highlight that to the audience that please use the Q&A chat function to pose questions to the presenters. And as we reach the discussion later on, the moderator, Professor Ashok Swine from Uppsala, will pick up questions and will divide them among the panelists. So we will save those questions until all the presenters have made their presentation. So, Khalid, please, I think you now have the possibility to share your screen. I think it's coming here. And we'll move downstream to Sudan and the recent and current situation related to floods. Your presentation is entitled The Devastating 2020 Floods in Sudan. Will 100-year events become 10-year events? ? Please go ahead.
The Hydraulic Research Center, the Ministry of Irrigation and Water Resources in Sudan. My presentation will be focusing on the devastating floods of 2020 in Sudan. And as an introduction, Sudan is a disaster-prone country where frequent floods and drought used to be occurred. Also, the reoccurrence of disasters result from increasing level of economic vulnerability and poverty. Also, factors such as climate change, unplanned urbanization, and land degradation, this is also mentioned by my colleague, Professor Getty, are the main contributing factors that affected the country. Floods and droughts are also the most common environmental hazard in Sudan that create a devastating impact on the social structures and the economy of the country as a whole. Climate change, deforestation, rapid urbanization, weak land use regulation and policies, in addition to weak infrastructures, the rapid population growth are among the factors or the main hazard drivers in the country. In terms of floods, Sudan has experienced many devastating floods during the past few decades, especially in 2013 and the last 3 consecutive years in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Also, as many parts of the world, Sudan experienced 2 types of floods: the flash floods from direct rainfall and sheet runoff, and the river floods, which take place along the river Nile and its tributaries in Sudan. These floods led to a widespread loss of assets and people life, baggages, and assets. The flood in the Nile region is directly related to high rainfall, which is also correlated to the sea surface temperature in the Pacific Ocean. So the El Nino condition in the Blue Nile correlated with drought, and the La Nina condition correlated with floods. And what has happened this year in 2020, that it started with El Nino condition until the end of July. This bring excessive rainfall in the Equatorian region. And then this situation converted to La Nina condition, and that bring excessive rainfall in the Ethiopian highland, which bring a lot of floods in the Blue Nile during August and September. This map on the left side of the screen by ECBAC showed the rainfall in the Ethiopian highland during the period between 8 and 15 September 2020. And it's clear that there is an excessive rainfall at that time in the Ethiopian highland. Also on the right side of the screen, this graph also shows the water level variation in Lake Tana in 2020 compared to the long-term average from 1992 up to 2019. And it's clear that the variation in Lake Tana level is much more higher than the long-term average water level. This is also a comparison of Lake Kyoga in the Equatorial lakes. The water level also in 2020 is much higher than the long-term average. This graph also shows the rainfall within the Lake Victoria subbasin. It also shows that the rainfall in 2020 is much higher than the long-term average in that subbasin. So altogether, make the water level in Khartoum station to rise into a level that is the maximum level within the history of the Sudan. If you compare it to the 3 historical devastating floods in Sudan, the 1964, the 1988, and this year, it's clear that the water level in Khartoum station is like 56 centimeter more than the highest recorded level ever. As an impact of flooding, impact can have a severe impact on communities. So floods can cause physical injuries and life loss and illness and loss of life also. Floods also can have impact on assets of people, and if you can see in these photos during this 2020 floods, people are trying to rescue their assets and baggage, and this brave man in the upper part of the screen is trying to rescue his cows. Floods can also have a devastating impact on the infrastructures and can damage the water supply system, the public utilities, schools, and roads. Floods can also have an impact on the environment, and many of the vegetation and crop areas have been washed away. At the flood management cycle in Sudan, three types of measures: measures before floods, measures during floods, and measures after floods. The measures before floods including prevention, mitigation, coordination, and early warning. While during flood, the measures include the emergency plan, and after flood, the measures include response, recovery, and resilience from flooding. To cope with flood, the coordination flow of information in Sudan is under the responsibility of the National Council of Civil Defense, which has a direct link with the Humanitarian Aid Commission, the HAC, which has an emergency operation room together with the emergency operation room for the civil operation room defense, together with the civil defense at the state level, and also the technical communication committee. This is include the Ministry of Irrigation, the Ministry of Defense, and many other stakeholders relevant to or working in the water sector. The government response to flood, the government has tried to protect people by making dikes during and before the flood event. While after the flood event, one of the responsibility of the government is to establish or to construct a camp for people displaced from their homes. The community also has a responsibility to deal with flood hazard. And if you can see in these photos, people are trying to protect their cities and assets and properties by building dikes by local materials. They are using sacks of soils to make a dikes. And if you can see here at the bottom, the left bottom of the screen, this is a very famous and trending photo during the 2020 flood, where young people from Tuti Island, they are using their bodies to make shelter to prevent their city from being flooded. So the total damage in Sudan, if we compare the damage in 2019 with 2020, it's clear that if you look to the number of people died in 2019 compared to the 2020, it's almost the same. 121 in 2020 and 123 in 2019. But if you look to the number of damage, the house damages, sorry, it's clear that the number of damaged houses in 2020 is almost double the number of houses damaged in 2019. And this is mainly because in 2020, most of the affected area are in the residence area in the cities. While if you look to the cultivated area, the loss of cultivated area in 2020 compared to the loss of cultivated area in 2019, it's clear that the cultivated area is in 2020 is half the cultivated area in 2019. This is also because of the reason I have mentioned. Because most of the inundated area are located in the cities. This is also two maps by UNITAR comparing the total flooded land in 2019 compared to 2020, and it's clear that the total flooded land in 2020 is almost, this is in Khartoum state, so it's almost 5 times the inundated land in 2019. So as an impact of the flood, this is also in addition to the impact of COVID-19 as well. So the projection for food security in Sudan, this is the outcome by FUSENET from October 2020 through January 2021. So most of the state in Sudan will be under stress or either under crisis for food security. So to conclude, floods and drought, the consequence of climate change have increased human insecurity in Sudan. The flood have also increased social and political tension and put more tension on the government because many people have been displaced from their homes and become refugees. Also, children in school collapse, and as a result, many of the study suspended into further notice. Also, high pressure on the government to provide food to the affected people. Also, the impact of flood on water quality may lead to waterborne diseases, for example, cholera and malaria, especially in the area close to the Nile. Also, additional pressure on the government to provide medical supplies in all affected cities for our quick response, such as cholera kits, mosquito nets, and basic medical supplies needed for human. So in Sudan, to cope with flood, we have so many challenges, including improved coordination. And my colleague Getty has also talked about the need for coordination and cooperation and planning for preparedness and disaster risk reduction. Also, enhancement of application of forecast modeling, because we need to have a robust forecasting model so that we can deal with flood. Also, disasters are viewed in isolation from the process of mainstreaming development in the country, and most of the country budget are lacking budget for emergency. Also, sharing of good practice and transfer of knowledge and experience in flood management through workshop and training is also needed. Also, improvement of capacity for flood disaster monitoring that reduce the risk is very important. Also, improve the coordination mechanism on data sharing and dissemination of information. This should be also on local, national, and regional level as well. Also, poor flood control facilities and settlement in floodplain areas is not accompanied by land use policies and regulation, and lack of studies of floodplain hazard potential. Also, accessibility problem in reaching the affected area. So most of the affected area is not accessible area. The country also has very limited resources to support the flood affected person because of the impact of COVID-19 also. So looking at the frequent flooding event in the last few decades, one can ask this question: will 100-year event become 100-year event? So I will leave this question for the audience to think about, and for the researchers in the region also to think about. And I will conclude my presentation by saying that let us strengthen the regional cooperation to convert flood from risk to opportunity. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mats.
Thank you very much, Khalid. That was a wonderful presentation, but I'm really sorry to see the devastation in your country. It's an extreme situation which you have to deal with both at your research center and also with the ministry, of course. So it really push and put stress on the government and all other institutions that needs to be engaged in reducing the suffering of people. And I take with me the important point that there's a very large need for a good coordination across the basin, but also national level to deal with this kind of disaster. We will continue to move downstream, and we will move all the way to the delta this time. And I will provide the floor to Professor Ali El Barawi from Ain Shams University. So we're picking up the role of different hazards, water quality, floods, and now we will see a little bit how the delta is facing the stress from two sides, from water stress in terms of quantity from upstream, and also the ocean pushing with sea level rise and increased stress from the ocean to cause also saline and other problems. Please, Professor Ali, the floor is yours, but let me see if I can. Yes, I think you should be able to speak now. Please go ahead.
Okay.
And then you can share your screen.
Yes.
The share function.
Yeah. I'm looking for the presentation. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, it's good.
Yeah, actually, as Matt said, it's called Effects of Drought, Sea Level Rise, and Saline Intrusion in the Nile Delta on Water Food Security in Egypt. My presentation will go with the same order of subjects mentioned in the title, where I will go through drought, sea level rise, saline intrusion, and water and food security. Most of my examples will be from the Nile Delta and from Egypt. I will start with a historical thing that the ancient Egypt was being described as a hydraulic society, but due to drought, the fall of the Egyptian Old Kingdom was the occurrence of a number of lower than average inundation events. This little infograph shows the effects of drought on the fertility of the agricultural land and the hydraulics of the river. Talking about fluctuation of Nile flow, to the left you can see the discharge variability for a certain period of time, and to the right you will find that the interannual variability of the Nile discharge. These units are in billion cubic meters. In Egypt, things are very little rain, as you can see. If you notice the numbers that were mentioned by Geta and Khalid, like we have here, maximum of 35 millimeter. We have very little rain in Cairo, and these are the fluctuation of the rain in millimeter in the months of January, both during 1 year, and to the right, it's fluctuation during a period of time from 1980 to 2010. More frequent drought in Egypt can cause a lot of problems for Egypt, especially it is the most arid country in the region, as we heard yesterday from the minister. With respect to sea level rise, I wanted to show you this map that shows the topography of the Nile Delta region, indicating the areas near or below mean sea level. I want to draw your attention to the left of the map, where you can see Alexandria, our main coastal city. There's a lot of areas that are below sea level. And one of our recent researchers showed that due to sea level rise, you can see that a lot of areas will be at risk and population would be displaced, and people will lose their jobs in agriculture, tourism, and industry. And he has 3 different scenarios to describe that. Groundwater extraction is an important subject because it has a relation to sea level rise and seawater intrusion, because when we do groundwater extraction, it will affect salination of groundwater. And saltwater intrusion will threaten the groundwater resources. There is a relation between the two things. Here, sea level rise is related to groundwater extraction, and there is a recent research I used here to illustrate 6 future scenarios about the increased extraction and sea level rise. This is a beautiful map of the delta. What I wanted to show you here are the governorates in the delta. They are around 13. Some of them are on the Mediterranean, and some of them are inside the delta. And this graph shows that groundwater extraction has very good relation with the increase of population. They increase together even though the units are different of course. These are the 6 different scenarios in terms of sea level rise and extraction of groundwater in billion cubic meter per year and the duration of the scenario. This graph, I wanted to show that not all the 13 governorates in the delta extract groundwater. From this chart, we can see that Gharbiya, Bahira, and Sharqiya, they drew more groundwater than the rest of the governorates. This map follows the previous one, but it shows proportional different groundwater types represented by 4 classes: fresh, brackish, light brackish, and saline water. With respect to saline intrusion, this infograph shows the movement of saltwater interface under the increased saltwater intrusion due to over-extraction, abstraction of sea level rise. They connect different factors, and this is again a map of the delta. The importance of this map is that it shows the categorization of the salt-affected soils according to 3 classes: none, moderate, and high saline soil. Interesting enough, you will find also circles that shows the locations of the pumps for reuse and drainage pumping, because delta is a lot of drainage and a lot of drainage reuse. Here you have to see 3 zones, going from salt water zone to mixing zone to fresh water zone. And this map shows a cross-section in the middle of the delta at different points in time, showing that salinity will be intruding with different effect in certain governorates, which is Sharqiya and Bahira. Again, it's a repetition, but it shows you 3 different cross-sections, again with the 3 different zones: the saline, the transition, and the freshwater. I like this table because it shows the 13 delta governorates with areas cultivated using different water resources: Nile water, groundwater, reuse, drainage, and rainwater. Because of this, I repeated the map of the delta and converted the table into graph to show you something interesting, that most of the irrigation water in Egypt is from the Nile. Then some small values for groundwater extraction and some sizable reuse, drainage, and very little rain. If you look at the 13 governorates, only Kafr Sheikh and Alexandria has some little rain that is used for agriculture. Again, 2 maps of the delta again, one of them showing the average drainage rates in the Nile and the average salinity of drainage water, because there is a great relation between the drainage rates and the average salinity. With respect to water food security, I will go quickly through the factors that affects that and shows us the relation between the previous phenomena and water food security in terms of interdisciplinarity of the subject, effect on transboundary issues, climate change, population, agricultural land, food production, and the synergy with climate change from other trends. Again, this is just a quick review of the aspects of interdisciplinarity covering infrastructural, institutional, political, social, and financial. And it requires interdisciplinary collaboration across sectors, community, and political borders. Transboundary issues are important, and we have enormous challenges, and we like to ensure coordination and dialogue between sovereign states. And this is, again, a seconding of what Geta and Khalid mentioned in their presentations. What is good about this, that there are numerous examples of around the globe that demonstrate that shared water provide opportunities for cooperation. But we have to ensure that water security is achieved for all users, whether upstream like Ethiopia, transitional Sudan, or downstream like Egypt. Again, it shows a relation between water security and climate change, that it will threaten existing water infrastructure. Again, population is affected. Why population is an issue here? Because Delta is the most populous area of Egypt, and it has the most agricultural activities. The problem with this population and security is that the most people who are suffering are poor people, because they don't have access to basic services and will be most at risk. An outstanding example of this, what we call encroachment on agricultural land, urban encroachment, that for the Egypt uses 86% of its water in agriculture, and more pressure will be put on agricultural sector. People say also another phenomena in Delta, that the farm area is reduced with time because of inheritance practices, and some people say we may use for like cash agriculture using horticulture, but this cannot be easily implemented because people there are without technical experience or even necessary finance. The striking example about this urban encroaching on agricultural land is in the governorate of Arbeya, where 30% of agricultural lands will be lost due to urban sprawl between 2012 and 2030. Same things goes with food production, will be affected. And I wanted to show you this graph that shows the climate change scenarios for self-sufficiency of main food commodities presented by wheat, milled rice, and maize, and the importance of taking adaptation action to lessen the adverse effects of climate change. Climate change does not work alone. It has some trends that synergizes and exaggerates and makes things worse. And these are population increase, urbanization, economic development that will add risk multiplier to food security by 2030. At the end, the Nile Delta in Egypt, as I mentioned, characterized by population increase and agricultural activities, is facing a lot of challenges due to climate change effects. Coupled with water scarcity and development in the upstream, the situation is likely to worsen if necessary actions are not taken. Government and research institutions are currently investing in projects and research to face such challenges. All of these in addition to the importance stressed by my other two colleagues of the importance of cooperation between the Nile Basin, Eastern Nile Basin countries. This is it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Professor Ali. That was an excellent presentation about the situation in the Nile Delta. It's very complex. There are many different layers of stress factors lining up. And of course, it's interesting to see your figure of 86% of the water being used for agriculture. That leads to another sort of bigger discussion on where does the water make best use on a national level. In most countries, water for tourism has a very high return, but of course that's completely zero at the moment. So There are many things that can be discussed here, but we will not stay there. We will move on, and I will give the floor to Dr. Kevin Wheeler. We have now seen sort of a toad's eye, a toad's patient from Sudan and Egypt on what's happening in terms of different aspects. We will now move to a bit more bird's eye view, and we will see a little bit what Kevin has to tell us about the hydrology in the basin, and particularly how we can deal with drought is one of the most important factors. So I will give the floor to Kevin now, and you can share your screen. Please, go ahead.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, so looking at regional coordination for drought and/or floods is what I've been doing for a while. So I'll present some of the material that I've done before, as well as just some new thinking about just overall management of the basin. I did post after yesterday. I got a good comment from the conference organizers about a paper that we published a couple of days ago. I put the link to that paper in the chat session there. So this work has been supported by several people throughout the different universities and ministries have been participating. What we call the Eastern Nile Research Universities and Centers, funded and supported by GIZ. As well as University of Oxford Martin School. Okay, so I always start with a review of the hydrologic situation and historical trends, just so we understand. The flows at the Rosaires border area near the Renaissance Dam, Ethiopian Dam area, generally been fairly stable through the years, but with a gradual increase, but obviously clear periods of droughts and floods that provoke the need for strategic planning. If you look at the naturalized flows at the Aswan Dam, we naturalize these. We can see a tendency for the flows to be increasing. You never know if they're going to continue like that. Certainly, droughts will always be possible. Certainly, increased flooding will always be possible. But in general, there seems to be more water available in the basin on average each year. However, certainly, if you look at the actual flows at Dongola, you see a noted decrease in the flow rates, driven a lot by the development through the years of upstream, particularly within Sudan. So the new paper is called "Understanding and Managing New Risks of the Nile with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam." And I'm just going to step through this quickly. And so we frame this paper around three different periods. A first era of the filling period, a second area we refer to as the new normal after the GERD is filled, and then a third era of multi-year drought, and identifying some of the risks and perceptions that could result during a major drought into the future. So I will mention the filling very quickly, and a lot of it focuses around how will Egypt be affected, how will the Aswan Dam be affected. So if we look at the historical Aswan Dam storage here, we can see the maximum elevation at about 182 meters and the minimum elevation at 147 meters, where the reservoir, there would be abrupt shortages below that. This is an annual flooding area zone. And then the low stages of the Aswan Dam includes a 5% reduction, 10% reduction, 15% reduction as the reservoir falls to lower and more critical levels. And these are important when we're thinking about how to plan for future drought management. So the question first during the filling is how far would the reservoir drop down? And through all the analyses that have done through the years, we do see a pretty good idea of the distribution of possible risks during the filling period, and a couple of things become very obvious. First off, the Aswan Dam will fall to lower levels that haven't been seen in a while. So we can see this is a plot going back to the beginning of the filling of the Aswan Dam. So it'll likely go down. However, the most likely case is it won't drop down below 60 billion cubic meters, and therefore no shortages would probably be required under normal hydrologies. However, Egypt always could invoke possible precautionary measures during the filling time to try to ensure that no critical levels are reached. But there's a very low probability that the Aswan Dam would fall to those critical levels, invoking large shortages. And so we looked at this both under various policies during the filling process. This one under a 35 billion cubic meter fixed release, another one simulating the Washington proposal, which they're not very different actually. So then when we look on into the future after the GERD is full, and there's two major reservoirs operating, a new normal condition. So in the dotted line is what the Aswan Dam would be like before the GERD, and the solid line would be after the GERD, and this shows the GERD elevation. And what we really see here is under average hydrologic conditions, without any significant new upstream depletions, the head's going to more or less recover, but operate on a lower level in general. Inflows into the Aswan Dam and into Egypt will be much more predictable, and the extremes will be buffered somewhat for sure. And therefore, as a result, under normal conditions, again, sort of minimal risk to Egypt as a result of the GERD, as long as there's no additional upstream extractions. So the outflows will essentially equal the inflows, less evaporation, 1.5 to 2 billion cubic meters. And there'll be significant benefits for both Ethiopia and Sudan and minimal risk to Egypt under this new normal situation. As long as there's good data exchange, really minimal coordination would actually be needed for most circumstances. However, data exchange will be. So the risk is becoming complacent of the future potential of a drought. So when we talk about the third era in this paper, we focus on this multi-year drought phenomenon. And we can expect that both reservoirs are going to end up going down and going back up. And so we want to look a little bit of what the risks are. Well, if we start out by looking at the Aswan Dam without the GERD in place, we can see that the Aswan Dam would drop low. Well, first off, we would have a drought onset period, followed by a drought recovery period. The Aswan Dam would likely fall below all three drought management policy trigger lines if the recurrence of the 1980s drought were to happen, resulting in some annual shortages within Egypt, annual shortages, could potentially reach near the critical level. This again, even without the GERD in place. If we do put the GERD in place, with the GERD being a sort of regular fill level, with some sort of hypothetical operation, we say 1,600 megawatts of power generation, what would happen in this case? Well, in this case, we can see that that during the onset period, the shortages to Egypt are actually delayed and they're reduced by 15 billion cubic meters as you're using the water within the GERD. As long as the Ethiopia continues to release that water downstream, it actually benefits during the onset time. However, during the drought recovery time, the shortages to Egypt would increase and become delayed. So, but overall, on the net, this is a good situation for Egypt because the upstream dams have provided additional resource during the drought period. However, the Ethiopian side, if we look at the storage of the GERD under this particular scenario, we can clearly see that the GERD would fall to its minimum operation level in this. So likely they're not going to want to do this. This would not be a suitable situation for Ethiopia as they would risk losing hydropower completely. So we can see a very difficult situation on the horizon, especially during the drought recovery period. Both countries are going to be very keen on recovering as soon as possible. And it will be a prioritization. In which order should the reservoirs be refilled? And what recovery needs are considered the most critical? Is the domestic supplies, reliable power production for the cities again? So very, very critical situations. And these issues need to be addressed prior to the onset of a drought. So what we want to bring to is, what does a basin-wide coordination look like? How can we move closer to that, even though we're far from that right now? Well, how can the multiple reservoirs be operated in a more coordinated way that can minimize the impacts of droughts and floods? So it's not only technically sound solutions, there's lots of good engineering solutions out there, but they also have to be politically viable to be able to be introduced into the basin and accepted by other countries. So we'll start with an ideal situation of reservoirs in a series. During a drought onset, in an ideal situation, if there were no political borders, you would typically empty the lower reservoirs first, and you'd empty the upper reservoirs last. And during a drought recovery, you would do the opposite. You would refill the upper reservoirs first, and you'd refill the lower reservoirs last. Now, why would you do that? Well, that's to maximize the hydropower potential, keeping most water higher in the basin for as long as possible, minimize the evaporation losses by doing this, as well as minimize the chance of any flood spills in case water does come in. It gets to fill up the lower reservoirs first and not spill. So that's under an ideal situation. Well, how could one operationalize this into a more practical situation? Well, we can imagine during a drought onset, the lower reservoir would start to drop down to some threshold that's pre-decided. And when it hits some trigger threshold, invoking a demand management to be able to limit how much water is being released from the lower reservoir. Following that, the upper reservoirs support the lower reservoirs and the lower basin demands by making releases and continuing to generate energy. And agreeing on an evacuation volume and an evacuation rate during that time. Now, during the drought recovery period, the upper reservoirs would begin to fill first, followed by the lower reservoirs. And again, agreeing on a refill rate, how fast they can recover and in what order they would recover. And finally, relaxing the demand management restrictions that were put into place. So to be able to do this more practical management of reservoirs in a series, it requires clear agreement on the threshold volumes and the rates and the trigger levels, et cetera, to be able to do this. And that's really informed based on a shared understanding of what the critical needs are during a drought, both in terms of the water supply as well as the energy generation. So for a two reservoir system like the GERD and the HAD, where the GERD is primarily a hydropower production, and the Aswan Dam is primarily for water release, water supply, it's important to recognize that electricity, the production of energy, is the same, it corresponds with releases downstream. So these two things are not actually at odds with each other. The trade-off is water supply and power generation now versus water supply and power generation later. The two go hand in hand. So we can imagine a decision tree between the two reservoirs where you have a decision for the upper reservoir at the GERD and lower reservoir at the HAD. And the upper reservoir would have to decide, do they continue the power generation as normal, or do they proactively reduce their power generation during a time of a drought? Well, if they continue their generation and the lower dam then decides to continue their own releases downstream, the risk is both reservoirs would deplete fast and everybody's at risk as a result. However, if the lower reservoir does start to reduce their releases, that means the current power needs are met, but the future power needs in Ethiopia are potentially at risk. But the future downstream needs are well protected. However, if the GERD is proactively reducing its power generation and its releases, and the Aswan Dam reduces as well, both the current and future power needs are carefully managed, and the future critical downstream needs are well protected. On the other hand, if the GERD retains water and the Aswan Dam continues to release water without restricting, then the future downstream supplies do become at greater risk. So a multi-reservoir drought coordination for the Nile, three major components. One, an agreed drought management policy for the Aswan Dam that's integrated into any kind of an agreement. A commitment by Ethiopia to support the Aswan Dam, and a commitment by Sudan to allow the backup water to reach the Aswan Dam. Only these three components together could there be any sort of a multi-reservoir coordination. Demand management must be part of a multi-reservoir agreement. reservoirs, without a doubt. So to switch over to floods very briefly, and my colleagues have already talked a little more about floods. Flooding is certainly one of the most challenging aspects of multi-reservoir management, but increased upper basin storage and normal operation will naturally reduce flooding. We know that. If releases are made at normal rates, it will vastly decrease the risk of flooding upstream. But floods do represent some of the most critical moments in river management, particularly with the risk and perception and risk of dam failure. Many rivers around the world will invoke a flood operations center, where managers across all the dams are working hand in hand through these critical times, minute by minute, to making sure that there's an agreement on how the river is going to be managed, because dam safety is the #1 priority for everybody during this situation. So coordinated flood management, how might that look like? Well, sharing forecasting information is absolutely critical. Making sure each reservoir evacuates sufficient space prior to the flooding season, and each reservoir commits to transparent communication of planned releases and spills, and each downstream reservoir signals their own ability to receive the upstream water. So this is very, very important to have this clear communication during the flooding periods. So just for a demonstration, under extreme flood conditions without close coordination, if you have, so normally you'd want to follow this called avoid liability rule. Do not release more water than the current inflow at any time when it could result in impact for a current or future flood event. So if a flood comes into the Garden, it fills up, and they decide to make a large release downstream to evacuate space, that can easily overrun the Rosaires Dam or easily overrun the Sennar Dam. And if those reservoirs are full, that could spell disaster for those reservoirs. And that continuing on downstream into Khartoum and down into Egypt. And then add the risk of any sort of rainfall on top of that. So these are situations that demonstrate just how incredibly important it is to coordinate during the flooding times. So what constitutes coordination between reservoirs? I'll end with this. Coordination and cooperation, it's a continuum. Not all situations have to be solved immediately. However, taking steps along this progression. So a basic data exchange, basic filling agreements, sharing operation plans will help move the countries further along this continuum of coordination. Critical situations, planning for drought operations, planning for flood operations will move us farther along that coordination or that continuum of cooperation. And then eventually, those optimized ideas, how do you maximize benefits, minimize risks, much more complicated mathematically, but those things come through time. What I want to emphasize is the step-by-step process. You have to start moving somewhere along that process with some of the basic elements, and then very quickly move into these critical situations. So final thoughts, one of my favorite quotes: the likelihood of conflict rises as the rate of change within the basin exceeds the institutional capacity to absorb that change. The basin is now facing dramatic changes, and the question is whether institutions can change their management, their behaviors, and their coordination to be able to deal with the upcoming changes. And with that, I will bring this to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that enlightening in the presentation on how to deal with drought conditions in the future. And I think it's common by all 4 presentations that there's a coordination needed in terms to deal with the hazards that we have: floods, droughts, water quality. And that's the challenge for the future. And I think it's very important what you stressed, that it's on the one side, it's the technical situation, which of course can be solved by technicians. But when you bring in the political dimension, it starts to become a little bit complicated, and that's where the solution needs to be found. Now I will hand over the floor to Professor Ashok Swain from the Department of Peace and Conflict Research at Uppsala University. He will moderate the question and answer, Q&A and discussion. And please submit your questions on the Q&A or chat function. And I will hope that Ashok will be able to pick up those. So let me just click the buttons here. And Ashok, I think now you should have the floor.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mats. It has been little bit more than 1 hour of very exciting discussions, particularly on a river basin, which is extremely important, which is going through lots of changes, in many ways, which all the presentators have already described. It's also going through an era of a number of issues and number of challenges, which I think is extremely interesting. And I think all these presentations have been very well structured in a sense, and particularly starting with the Lake Tana and how it is getting silted, and how the upstream and the catchment is supposed to be kept in good order if the whole basin needs to take the benefit of the river. Then we also see how in Sudan the flood situation is getting more and more problematic. There are challenges of the new government, and how this is also depends on the flood management situation is extremely important to deal with in cooperations with other countries. And then in Egypt, we also introduced to the drought, sea level rise, saline intrusion in the Nile Delta, and what are the possibilities of other sources of water and how that will impact the food security. And I think in the late we discussed how the present situation has emerged, particularly with the Grand Renassa Dam, and how that is going to be a challenge, which it's a technical, it's a developmental issue. At the same time, it's also a kind of political challenge how to address this. And I think it has been, everyone has been all the time saying that we, particularly of our 4 presentators, have emphasized we need coordination and cooperation. These are the 2 words which have come over and over again from all the presentators, that if we really want to make the changes or at least make beneficial of the river for the people and in these changing circumstances. And I think that's something extremely important to really reiterate and also revisit. And I think while I asked all the those who wants to ask the questions, please write the question in the Q&A, and I will try to find out which questions to ask. And please don't make the long questions. We don't have much time, so that I will do. But I think while I'm collecting the questions, I will try to find out from the presentators what exactly there's a lot of discussions going on. There is a lot of interesting environment has developed in the desert. But at the same time, the researchers, when they were talking, there is how their knowledge can be really transmitted to this kind of political security discourse, and how we can positively really, influence the kind of political decision making at this stage. So if I will first ask Gete, can you please, if you are available, just tell your thoughts. How can we really, as a researcher and academics, as experts, can really contribute to in this area to the political decision making which is going on, or discussions which are continuing?
Thank you, Ashok. Well, is it from my side or somebody else?
I am asking the same question to everyone. I want you to first tell, then I will move on from one to another.
You know, from my perspective, the professional should be able to engage with politicians professionally to show the facts and figures about the whole situation in general. I mean, we know that I don't think the water right now, if we manage it well, is scarce. But we have to manage the water in a win-win scenario. Like, for instance, it has to go up to the level of choosing the economic specialization even, you know. Should we grow water demand crops in Sahara and Egypt, or should we specialize on something that doesn't demand water in Egypt and grow crops somewhere where there is a potential and create a market linkage in between? That's one point. Second, we need also to show them what are the impacts of all the traditional way of doing things in general at the basin level, but at country level, and showing even the prospect, the future also. And you know, we tend to show the alarm, but also we have to show the opportunity of cooperation and managing things together. But unfortunately, there are professional groups who actually manufacture data and support the immediate needs of some politicians. And I think professionals, genuine professionals, should step up and say, you are wrong, you know. So there are so many ways that we can support.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's very important, that the genuine science should prevail. Genuine researchers should come out. There is one additional question which I see in the chat which has been asked to you. So before I move to Khalid, can I ask you this? You said that there is a siltation taking place in the Lake Tana. How do you think that, what do you have the estimation of the silt reaching the dam, God Dam, the Grand Renassa Dam? And how could we solve that problem?
Well, right now, my worry is if Lake Tana dries up, silted up, and then little by little, the Blue Nile will be lost. That is the kind of, because that's a major headwater and the source. Right now, Lake Tana is actually absorbing about 90% of the silt. And Lake Tana Basin is about 10% of the whole Abai Basin. So the silt that's going from Lake Tana to the Grand is rather very low, maybe 10%. But from our modeling exercise, the silt that's going to the GERD is around 300 million tons per year. So the chance of the GERD that will survive is about maximum 100 years. And for that big infrastructure, 100 years is nothing. So we just alarm the government that they should protect the catchment, not only the Lake Tana basin, but the whole catchment.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Khalid, you mentioned the way the flood situation and how the different challenges the government is facing. How do you see this? Continuing this our discussion, the role of us, or the role of the people, those who really try to see it in a much more scientific way, to look at what exactly taking place rather than looking at much more politically. So how do you see the contribution of the expert group to this ongoing discussion or ongoing flood management also in Sudan?
Well, I think and I believe this is part of our job as researchers and scientists. We are not isolated from the politicians. So we have to make sure that all we are doing can find the channel for the politician. And from here, I also invited the politician to listen to science and to build their decision on science. So people are doing a lot of research here maybe in Sudan and also in the basin. So I invited the politician to read what the researchers are writing about death and about the flood and about other issues. So I think it's very important. It's very important to separate I mean, let us think widely for the whole basin. So we don't have to stick to the local or regional idea. We have to deal with the whole basin as one entity. So this is also an invitation for all NGOs and international institutions that we need your support and we need more research in the region. You know that there is a limited resources for research in this basin, and we are facing so many challenges. So I think it's very important, extremely important that people have to build their decision on science. This is very important and crucial issue.
Thank you, Khaled. There is another additional question which I see from someone has asked. The question is about the upstream, the upper riparian, the areas which are being getting, the problematic, or at least not all getting the water or taking the water the way it should be, deforestation, the kind of resources being exploited. But at the same time, also there is the discussion also about the upstream dams. How does that come into play? The discussions in the flood issue in Sudan. Did you get my question?
Sorry?
Did you get my question? How the upstream is impacting upstream environmental resources as well as the infrastructure are impacting the floods in Sudan.
Yes, for sure. We are looking at it as an opportunity to control the flood from Sudan and from preventing Sudan from flooding. But at the same time, there is a fear from the public here in the country that this can also make a devastating drought also in Sudan. And this is start from this July when Ethiopia has started the first filling of air in July during the drought season here in Sudan. And that has made many water supply utilities in Khartoum out of service in July. So people are not happy. So we think that if like a more coordination mechanism between upstream and downstream, that could prevent both situations, prevent drought and prevent also floods. So it's not only flood, but it's also drought. So that's why I'm saying that we need to have a very strong coordination mechanism. And I'm listening for presentation for years, and I have seen that people are recommending coordination and cooperation all the time. So it's time now to say that let us move from recommendation to concrete action.
Thank you, Khalid. Professor Ali, can I get your attention, please? I think you made a very passionate, very convincing presentation that how the underground water extraction is really creating problems also for the sea level rise, sea level intrusion, and also salinity increase. How do you see? I mean, it has a quite direct impact with the food insecurity issues in the country, and also it has become the part of this discussion quite now as an alternative way of water use in Egypt by getting the underground water. How do you see this whole thing in the larger perspective of food security? What your suggestions? How do you suggest your government to look at this kind of food security issue in the new situation which is emerging?
Yeah, actually, yeah, food security in Egypt is an issue in light of the situation now. And the government, from what I see, because I follow very well the activities of the ministry, and I listen to some media from the government, they are taking steps. Like one example is a huge project, very costly project to line irrigation canals, because by lining 20,000 kilometers of irrigation canals, we can save 5 billion cubic meter that goes into infiltration every year. Therefore, this gives you just one example. Another example, it has to do with greenhouses for agriculture and transforming traditional irrigation methods into modern irrigation methods. In addition, also creating large areas of aquaculture, because fish is an important source of protein that can help with the issue of food security. To answer your question, I think Egyptian government and Egyptian people are looking at things differently now, and they are capable, I am sure, of coming up with innovative solutions that were not discussed 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, because the situation is really intense. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, I mean, this is what we always need to rethink and discuss, particularly to find some way that what exactly the possible solution could be or possible way to go. I think. Thank you. I'll go, finally I will go to Kevin. Kevin, there is a question somehow. There is you mentioned that I think it is a question which has been asked to you actually in the section. The dam, both in Aswan Dam and the Grand Renassa Dam, if we need to refill both of them when both are empty in the dry season. I don't really get this question, but what I'm saying is that do we have the similar type of situation in any river basins, any kind of dams, where there are 2 dams which exist in 2 different riparian countries, and if there is a drought period, how do they have managed? Do we have that kind of experience from any other dam in other river basin? Kevin.
There we go. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
You know, it is a very unique situation. I don't know of any really good comparative examples across international borders where it's being done well when water supply is the primary objective. There are of course a lot of good transboundary rivers for Europe where there's multiple countries and a lot of management. Probably the most similar is actually the Colorado River between Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which are different states within the U.S., but both very large reservoirs. And there's a lot of planning that has to go on and debates between the states on how to refill the reservoirs under critical situations. So there is no good precedent that I know of for sure. There are other reservoirs around the world, certainly colleagues in Turkey and Iraq have discussed in some of the previous panels. But there's no good template on how to do this. But I think primarily the thought is really identifying a priority of needs to because everybody recognizes there are certain needs that are more critical than other needs within a critical period, and to have some sort of prioritization. Sometimes that's based on some predetermined water right, but sometimes it's done on just human need. Municipal areas first, drinking water first, followed by agricultural water, or however the series would be. But yeah, there's really no good template that I know of that to follow with this. Yeah.
Now that would have been quite nice to see that if there is certain things exist, or even within the country like United States or Australia or in India, if there are certain kind of principle exist, probably it would have been able to get certain kind of ideas how to do it. But I think that's an interesting idea. I think this is important.
Yeah,
how to do this.
Thank you very much. Worth exploring.
Yeah. I will because I think I have run out of time as it looks like. Thank you so much for all the taking these questions, answering these questions, which we got quite a few, but I don't have time to go through all through them. Now I will hand over the mind job to Mats. Please, Mats, you need to take the hostship right now. Thank you. Mats?
Thank you very much, Professor Ashok. Thank you very much, and thanks to
Have we lost Mats?
Yes, now he's back. Mats, unmute yourself.
I'm trying. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so I will conclude with taking this long list of rich experiences and concluding remarks to only three things I want to mention. The first thing is you all have stressed the extreme importance to build decisions on science. It's very important that we don't take decisions out of the air, but science-based decisions, so that it will have a underpin a sustainable development. That's very important. Second one, which you all have mentioned, is we need to coordinate and we need to collaborate on almost all matters that has been discussed, on floods, on droughts, on river basin management in terms of land use, and in many other aspects. And of course, it leads to the intricate
We lost Mats again.
The Swedish internet system works better. Now he's back.
Yeah, okay. So my water has a value. It's been mentioned many times here that water actually has a price. If invest in lining 20,000 kilometers of canal, it means that investment, the price is lower than the price of the water. And we have to consider that when we for the water use. So it's not good economy to produce cheap crops with expensive water. Instead, we should see what can we use the water in, because if you produce in another, you can trade between the two. Thank you very much to the presenters. Thanks to the audience for being with us in real life. And
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
It was a great pleasure meeting you all.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Bye from my side, and nice to meet you, Khalid, Ali, Kevin, and everyone.
Mr. Kethi, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was absent for some time. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much.
But now
Thanks
we
a
can
lot.
do quite well now. So thank you.
Yeah, I drive
Good luck with
about
your PhD.
200.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ashok.
Bye, Ali. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you much.
Ali.